What do the following figures and people have in common? What do the mythical figures of Greek literature like Leda, Persephone, Medusa, and Cassandra have in common with Dinah, the daughter of Leah and Jacob in the Hebrew Bible? What does Lavinia, the daughter of Titus Andronicus in Shakespeare's play, have in common with the Sabine women of Rome in the 8th century? What do 500,000 women and girls during the 1994 genocide in Rwanda have in common with the 60,000 women and femmes during the civil war in Sierra Leone? What do they have in common with the thousands of women and girls during the war in Bosnia? What do the whistleblowers and testifiers of the Me Too movement have in common with the survivors of Larry Nassar's crimes and MSU's institutional neglect? And what do they have in common with the political prisoners of Palestinian descent, men and women, in Israel's detention facilities right now? What do they have in common with Gwen Araujo, a trans woman from California, or China Lindsay, a trans woman from Texas? And what do they all have in common with Giselle Pellicot of France, or the Jane Doe accuser of our current Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, or with E. Jean Carroll, Ivanka Trump, and the 24 other women who have publicly accused the President of the United States of sexual violence? They are all part of a long, dominant story that, over the course of 25 centuries, across the globe, has taught us that sexual violence and abuse enacted against women and girls has a political cause, a political function, and a political goal of subjugation. And it teaches us that the political cause, function, and goal is often staged in the private realm. Sexual abuse is a tool most often used to wrest and maintain power, and this power, most often, is never intended to be handed back to women or girls. On one hand, sexual violence has been used as an overt colonizing tool and a weapon during wartime. We see this in the mass rapes of women by both soldiers and civilians during genocidal wars and periods of ethnic and religious cleansing. On the other hand, narratives about sexual violence, both imagined and rhetorical, whether through lies and legends, rumor and misinformation, popular TV like Law and Order or films, has been used to fabricate the looming threat of the ultimate other for hundreds of years in the United States. The monstrous, undocumented farm worker, the unscrupulous, animalistic black man, the deranged horde of brown immigrants called a dusky peril, have all been staple figures of political rhetoric designed to inspire fear and coerce people into obedience. In fact, one of the most effective and recurrent figures during this election campaign was that of the immigrant as a rapist. Narratives about sexual violence have impacted labor policy, foreign policy, domestic policy. The scholar Carol Harrington shows us that feminist neo-Orientalism has dramatized sexual violence in the lives of so-called Eastern, so-called Third World women in order to secure an elite political authority over those women. We see this in how liberal feminists rescued Muslim women in Afghanistan to ultimately justify continued US occupation. We see it in the bans of the hijab in France, where it is deployed as a symbol of sexual oppression, but is in fact a way of perpetuating the myth of the sexually violent Arab. We see it in the damaging image of trans men as sexual predators, and in the policies that restrict the use of public space. We even see it in J.D. Vance's description of children forcibly conceived of incest as a mere inconvenience to women. Meaning, narratives and images of sexual violence have been used for both politically virtuous ends, like ensuring the basic human rights of women, and for propagandistic reasons, both. We learn from this that the suffering of girls and women is too often abused and instrumentalized. The sorrows of sexual trauma are often appropriated to affirm agendas, institutional, imperialist, that ultimately endanger women. This cycle has brought us to forms of contemporary, cynical utilization of trauma narratives and demonstrates that the sexual abuse of girls and women has functioned as a kind of open signifier for a variety of agendas that almost anyone can take up. In this cycle of the use and abuse of these narratives, where are the women? Where are they to be heard? Who will come to hear them? And I see the answer right in front of me, actually. What role does art play to counter these more nefarious reductions of such trauma? And I think we're here to ponder these questions as we listen to the immersive reading of the parts of Dentro, Inside, a true story by the Italian playwright Giuliana Musso, which has been translated into English by Juliet Guzzetta. In Juliet's own description, Dentro dramatizes Musso's real-life encounter with an acquaintance who shared an impossible story. In the opening minutes, Roberta discloses the horrifying experience of slowly learning something about her family, her ex-husband, her daughter. And here in Juliet's description again, over a series of chapters or scenes, it becomes apparent how every system in place to help vulnerable members of society, from the hospitals to private psychologists, the police and law enforcement, eventually the lawyers, the whole legal system, and even language itself, was unable to support Roberta and her daughter. Two brilliant scholars and artists will immerse us into this world. Helen Veit is an associate professor of history at MSU who specializes in the history of food and works on topics including picky eating, I'll ask you about that, industrial food, and the history of cookbooks. After lots of community theater in the 1980s and 90s, this is her 21st century acting debut. Juliet Guzzetta is an associate professor jointly appointed in the Department of English and the Department of Romance and Classical Studies. She teaches and writes in both English and Italian on contemporary theater, performance, and gender studies. Before pursuing her doctorate, she studied at the Moscow Art Theater and worked professionally as an actor and playwright, mostly in Lower Manhattan and the Edinburgh Fringe. Dentro, Inside, is her first translation, which we're just so glad about. Let's welcome them to the stage, and yeah, with a warm round of applause.
Good evening. I'm not a character. My name is Giuliana. I'm 50 years old and I live in Udine. I am myself. A year ago, I met a woman. Her name is Roberta. She is the same age as me. She lives in Milan. She has 3 kids. She is not a character either. She is herself. Chapter 1, Inside a Bar. She asked to meet because she had something to tell me. We hugged like old friends, but we weren't old friends. We ordered a drink and immediately started talking about work, children, Milan, our age, laughing. Eventually, I asked her what she wanted to talk to me about, and she told me. First, though, she warned me it was a highly confidential matter and that I needed to be discreet. All right. Not satisfied, she came closer, lowered her voice, and told me there had even been a criminal investigation into this, but that the case was dismissed and sealed. And because of that, she wasn't supposed to tell anybody about it. I told her that I'd rather not have all that responsibility, that maybe it was better if she didn't tell me this thing. She told me anyway. Her story begins at the end of her marriage when her husband left, out of the blue. She thinks it's a midlife crisis or problems at work. I think maybe he had a lover.
No, he didn't have a lover.
She tells me about her kids, David, the first, Chiara, the second, and Samuel, the third. She says that Chiara has always been a difficult child, that after her parents separated, she became more unmanageable. She's an angry teenager, extreme at times. She swears and screams. When she lashes out at Roberta, she talks about her father in ambiguous terms. Like, you don't know who Dad really is. Until the day she says he did something to her at night in the bed inside their house. I immediately asked Roberta to be more explicit. What exactly did he do to her?
Well, no one knows. She never said, and there wasn't any proof. No one in the family ever saw anything. Oh, I mean, I had seen redness on her face several times, around her chin, on her cheeks when she was little. I asked her how she got those marks, and she said, at night. I said, what do you mean at night? You mean you dreamt about them at night? Then I went to her little brother and I said, you have to stop wrestling with your sister. You're leaving bruises all over her. At night, I was working. Several times a week, I wasn't home. And when I was so tired that he would be the one to go in and see the kids if they woke up. He didn't mind at all. He said that at night he would sleepwalk to the kids. He didn't even wake up, didn't even remember what he did at night. That's what he would always say in front of everybody. Oh, and he slept in a t-shirt, like some men do, but then he'd go to the children like that at night, not wearing any underwear.
And then she tells me that no one wants to hear about this stuff anymore, not even her daughter. But she wants to tell the whole story to me.
The case was sealed. If I even talk about it with anyone, he can sue me. That means it's over, forever. We have to pretend that nothing ever happened. I didn't know how to help my daughter, and now it's too late for me, but there must be something I can do or I'll go crazy. So maybe I can help someone else. I thought of you. I've seen your theater pieces. You can create a play where you say these things really happened. There's a shitload of these people out there. You can talk about it. So I tell you my story, and you create a play.
So that's what she wants from me, a play about intra-family sexual abuse. Let's say the word, incest. It's hard even to utter. I can see how it could comfort her, but no, it's not possible. Not for me. I explained to her that theater's no different from the rest of the world. Certain things cannot be said. So-called documentary theater is no longer fashionable. And political theater, forget about it. Meanwhile, the bar empties out. The bartender tells me we can stay while she cleans up. Shall we?
It's a nightmare. Part of me still hopes it's not real, that Kiara made it all up. And how can you think that your husband, the father of your children, for all these years, inside your home, has abused your daughter? It makes you want to jump out the window. Some days I say to myself, all right, okay, fine. She doesn't want to talk about it anymore. Okay, we'll move away. I file it, pretend that nothing ever happened, and that way everyone's happy, right?
Well, are you asking me?
Yeah, you.
I want to tell her what I've been telling myself for years, that only the truth can save us. I want to say to her, either you believe her or you don't believe her, but make up your mind. If you believe her, then who cares about lawsuits? Put your body in front of your daughters. Speak, scream the truth to everyone and drag that piece of shit to court. I want to tell her like that. I tell her. She's speechless. Me too. I breathe. I think of my daughter when she was little and want to cry. She's embarrassed, blushes, apologizes. She realizes she's asked an impossible favor. Meanwhile, I keep imagining myself in her shoes, and I wonder how she hasn't gone crazy.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think about it all the time. I torture myself. I obsess over it. But what can I do? I have a gag order. I can't say anything because he'll take away my kids. I could have appealed the dismissal, but this big shot lawyer in Milan advised me against it. He looked at the paperwork, and you know what he said to me? He said, ma'am, this is a classic. You just have to deal with it. Let me give you some good advice. Just find yourself a good therapist and swallow the pill.
I don't understand. What did he say?
He said, ma'am, let me give you some advice. Find yourself a good therapist and swallow the pill.
As far as I'm concerned, the big shot lawyer and the good therapist can go fuck themselves.
Could we see each other again?
Sure. Chapter 2, Inside the Beautiful Home. We planned to meet in Milan, where I had to go for work anyway. I walk into her beautiful home. It's like a dream, with a huge living room, many other rooms, balconies everywhere, tons of sunlight, a yellow sofa. The children aren't around.
This house disgusts me. I can't wait to move. Take a look at all these bookshelves, all that culture, right? It's all for looks.
Did you marry for love?
Yes. I mean, in my eyes, he was perfect. Handsome, kind, cultured, rich.
Did he love you?
He showered me with compliments, especially in front of others. You're the best woman, a wonderful wife, perfect mother. Give me a break. The house I grew up in, you're an idiot, was a compliment.
Well, what about your intimate moments? Did he have problems?
No particular problems, but he was mechanical, detached, emotionless.
Even in the beginning?
Yes.
And you were okay with that?
No, not at all.
So why did you marry him?
Sex wasn't the priority, at least not for me. I wanted a lot of kids. He wanted a lot of kids too. In the beginning, we had said that we would share the responsibilities, but then in practice, oh man, one year, I almost had a nervous breakdown. David had broken his pelvis. Chiara was freaking out. And in the midst of all this, and my father, he'd had a stroke. In the midst of all of it, he decides to enter an Ironman competition that requires him to train every damn weekend. And I would say to him, good job, love. In the middle of all of this, at least you can release some tension. Nice, right? You know, Pollyanna, that little girl who always looked on the bright side of things, that was me. If she fell into a lake of shit, she'd say, oh, how lucky there are no crocodiles. You should write a play, Pollyanna and Iron Man.
I tell her if there was something to laugh about, I'd happily write it. She asks me if I've reconsidered her proposition to do a play. She insists. I'm firm. Yes, I've thought about it, but it's not for me. I'm sorry.
I understand. It's my fault. Did I give you the wrong impression when I told you that I sometimes don't believe it myself? Because that's not how it is. I believe Chiara. I know he did something to her, but what I think isn't enough. Everyone says this is the result of a messy separation for a girl with a bad temper who couldn't handle the end of such a picture-perfect family. But when the whole world is telling you, I believe her. But what do I do with my truth?
What do I do with my truth? What kind of question is that? We're not talking about some subjective experience here. We're talking about establishing whether or not there was abuse. If there was, it's not about your truth, but about reality, about facts. If I, as an adult, commit a sexual act with a minor, a child or a teenager, that is always abuse. It's a crime. And also, I don't understand. Has anyone asked Chiara to say exactly what her father did to her?
Well, I have, 1,000,000 times, even just a few days ago.
And what did she say?
Well, she said she doesn't want to talk about it and she would never tell me. She doesn't want to talk about it. She's done.
Well, and the police? Who did she talk to?
A police officer and a therapist, both women.
But did she know them? Had she spoken to them already?
No, she'd never seen them before.
Well, and what did she say?
Well, I read the report. There are transcripts of the interrogations.
And what did she say?
She said she doesn't remember, that she remembers the before and the after, and that when she woke up after, there was pain.
Pain? Where? What kind of pain?
Well, they asked her, in your pelvic area, and she said, yes, in my pelvic area.
Well, so she said it. She said it. She said, in my pelvic area.
Well, yeah, she said it, but that isn't enough.
But why? What else was she supposed to say to two strangers she'd never met before? I mean, what else is a kid supposed to say?
Oh, sorry, the two doctors in child neuropsychiatry had also asked her that, and she told them to fuck off right away.
But hang on, why child neuropsychiatry?
Oh, well, because she was in such a state of agitation that I checked her in.
Into the hospital?
Yes.
And in the hospital, they didn't do a gynecological exam?
Nope.
But did you ask for one?
Well, I had already taken her to my gynecologist, but she didn't do a full exam. She said it wasn't necessary.
And when she was little, did she have these kinds of problems?
Yes. At 8 or 9 years old, she often had discomfort down there, itching, an infection.
At 8 years old?
Yes, the doctor told me that it was related to the intestine.
And that was the end of it?
Yes, that was the end of it.
And the police, they didn't send her for a medical exam, a checkup?
Well, they asked me if I had sent for one, and I brought them my doctor's file.
Who hadn't performed a full exam.
Exactly.
Let's have a coffee. I want to know more about your life in this beautiful home.
To you, it's beautiful. To me, it is sickening. It's not like when your house is crumbling, but you still have nice memories. Here, it is the opposite. The house is intact, but the memories they're shattered.
Okay, well, I want to know more about when this shattering began.
It was about 6 years ago. Yeah, at Christmas, he went to Austria for an Ironman competition. And from then on, he started to find a million excuses to be away from home, from us. And I couldn't understand why. I asked him if there was another woman. He swore there was not. Problems at work or debts, no. So basically, this difficult situation goes on for almost a year. And one day, I come home and I say, Andrew, enough. We're all suffering here. It would be better for everyone if you took some time for yourself. Take a week, think about it, decide what you want to do. A week later, he returns and he says, I've decided I'm not coming back. And I said, but why? And I even thought, shit, what have I done? I was desperate. That very night, he calls the kids into the study and he says, your mom and I aren't getting along anymore, so I'm going to go live somewhere else. But for you, nothing will change. What do you mean, nothing will change? You know in films, when the main character dies in the middle of the story and it seems like a mistake, you can't accept it? Well, David got up, stood behind him and made this gesture like Dad was crazy. Kiara just changed the subject. She said, Dad, this phone sucks. And Sam, he said, Dad, when are you coming back? The next day, he came to get some clothes, and I helped him. I helped him load the car. I even gave him some food I had in the fridge so we'd have some meals ready. And I kept telling him, come back whenever you want. This will always be your home. I mean, I was in shock. I didn't understand the reason. There was no reason. Well, no. I mean, the reason was that Kiara was growing up. She was getting older, and she was starting to understand, and he needed to get away from her. Not from me, from her. But I only figured that out later. I figured it all out later.
I leave the house with a strange feeling of uneasiness. I get in my car and go to Rubiera. In 2 days, I'm supposed to meet with the artistic director of a theater festival, the Venice Biennale. The upcoming theme is censorship, concealment. An important subject, but I'd have no idea how to tackle it. I drive my car and try to stop thinking about all this. Chapter 3. Inside a play. The day after my meeting, I call Roberta. I tell her I'm on my way back to her place in Milan because I need to speak with her. She warns me that the kids are home. Chiara answers the door. She's very beautiful. She's 17, but she looks much older. She has a small piercing on her eyebrow and a garish one on her upper lip. I don't know why, but when I introduce myself, I say, pleased to meet you, and shake her hand. She has a firm grip, like an adult. She takes me to her mom and then leaves us alone. I also meet David and Samuel, and then Roberta and I are together. I tell her that I've thought about it. that there has been an incredible coincidence. I tell her about the festival, the themes of censorship and concealment. Seriously, Roberta, this is really an incredible coincidence. I tell her I've changed my mind. I think trying to do this show is the right thing. I don't know how, I have no idea, but I'd like to try.
Really? Oh, thank you. What can I do?
Well, you can't give up on me. Let's make a pact. We'll start together and we'll end together. And you have to tell me everything. We have to understand, make sense of things. And I'm going to record every time we talk.
I'll do it. I'm in. At least this will have some purpose, right? Oh, thank you. You don't know how happy I am. Because you see this house? It looks normal, but it's not. Some mornings I wake up and I feel like I am raising the curtain on the beginning of a play. Places everyone, we have breakfast, we get ready for school, the kids go off, I go to work, afterwards I drive them to sports and parties, and we seem so normal. We seem perfect, and we're not. It's all pretend. We are all playing a part. You understand why I said to myself, I have to do something or I'll go crazy. You understand why I called you.
But this feeling of playing a part, you didn't have that before?
No, never. But I was.
It's a long road from here to a play, and there's lots to do. I spring into action. I look for research on the topic. It is as scary as it is generic. The quantity of people this has happened to isn't something that one can grasp. I can't start from there. The written testimonies I find are too embellished. They're not useful to me. I contact a few people who I know who were abused in their childhood, all abuses that went unpunished. I listen to them, and then I turn to books. I reread Carol Gilligan. I also reread studies by Alice Miller on childhood trauma. Continuing in that direction, I discovered Jeffrey Mason, and through his work, I come to Freud. Well, that wasn't a surprise, because sooner or later, all roads lead to Freud. But here I slow down because I find something that disturbs me. On the evening of April 21st, 1896, in front of his colleagues of the Society of Psychiatry and Neurology in Vienna, Freud presents a paper entitled The Etiology of Hysteria. It's a revolutionary theory on the origin of mental illness, according to which its origin lies in trauma of a sexual nature suffered in childhood. The words that Freud uses that day to describe these traumas are rape, abuse, attack, outrage, aggression, trauma, seduction. The term chosen to define this theory will be the only one with an inherent ambiguity: seduction, theory of seduction.